It was one of those heavy evenings when the Abuja sky carried the smell of wet dust and thunder, and inside the great A's mansion the world felt so different from the narrow streets where Amaka had grown up scrubbing floors for pennies. At only 19, she had already learned what it meant to be invisible, to bow her head when madams barked orders, and to hide her tears in the smell of detergent. But this night would change everything. Amaka had been assigned to clean the study, a room whispered about among staff, a place with polished mahogany that only the chief himself touched. Dust lightly, don't disturb drawers, Madame Rose, the longtime housekeeper, had warned her. She nodded, pretending not to feel her heart thump at the chance to stand where men signed papers worth more than her life savings. The storm outside rattled the windows, rain streaking the glass like frantic fingers, while Amaka's hands, small and calloused, moved carefully over gold picture frames of men in Agbada, smiling with governors, certificates from Oxford and Harvard gleaming under the chandelier. She told herself to finish quickly, to stay unnoticed, yet something pulled her toward the far side of the desk. One drawer, darker than the rest, looked like it had not been touched for years. She wiped the handle. It wouldn't budge. She tried again, softly, nervously glancing over her shoulder. On the third tug, it gave, a cough of air escaping, like a breath trapped too long. Papers shuffled inside. She bent closer, pulling out a sleeve of photographs. What she saw nearly sent her fainting. Her own late mother, Mama Nkem, smiling in a lilac wrapper, standing right there in the same study under the same chandelier. Her knees buckled, her mouth open, but no sound came. Behind the photo was another, Mama holding a baby in her arms, the background of the mansion unmistakable. Amaka's eyes froze on the silver anklet around the baby's ankle, the tiny letters engraved, A.E. Her pulse pounded as her fingers traced the letters. Amaka Eze? Her name, her whole existence, staring back at her from a photograph hidden in her master's desk. Memories of Mama came crashing like the rain outside, how she coughed in the nights, how she sold vegetables by day, how she whispered, "One day you will understand why I pushed you to study." But Mama never told her she had worked in this mansion, never told her she had been close to Chief Eze, never told her there was a secret buried inside a drawer. Amaka stuffed the photo back quickly, her breath unsteady, when she felt eyes on her. She spun. Madame Rose stood in the doorway, her arms folded, her face unreadable. For a moment, silence stretched like a rope between them, only the thunder outside filling the space. "You were told not to open drawers," Rose said quietly, not accusing, but heavy with meaning. Amaka swallowed hard, searching for words. "It jammed," she whispered, her voice shaking. Rose's eyes flicked not to the drawer, but to the corner of the study, where one loose floorboard had always lifted slightly. "Some drawers stick because of what they hold," she murmured, her tone both warning and invitation. Amaka clutched her rag, feeling as though she was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to fall into a truth that could either lift her out of poverty or drown her in secrets too heavy for her young shoulders. Her chest rose and fell in sharp bursts, every nerve alive. She wanted to ask Rose what she meant, wanted to shout questions about why her mother's smile was captured in the home of a man who owned fleets of cars and estates, while Mama had died with unpaid hospital bills. But her tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth. Rose studied her for a long, almost tender second, then turned and walked away, leaving Amaka alone with the storm, the photos, and a drawer that would never close the same way again. As the lightning flashed across the chandelier, Amaka slid the photo back into her pocket without thinking, her hands trembling. She did not know then that this single act of curiosity, this disobedience, would open the door to a truth far bigger than her job, her poverty, or even her own name. "If this were you," Standing in your boss's mansion and finding your late mother's photo hidden in his desk, would you run and pretend it never happened? Or would you stay and demand the truth? The rain had cleared by dawn, leaving Abuja washed in silver light. But Amaka's heart carried the weight of a storm that refused to end. And as she lay on her narrow bunk in the staff quarters, she stared at the cracked ceiling while the hidden photo of her late mother burned hot against her chest, under her uniform, like a secret that wanted to breathe. The other maids bustled about the room, laughing over pepper soup and gossiping about the driver's stubbornness, but their voices sounded far away, muffled by the pounding of Amaka's own thoughts. She could see Mama's face in her mind, smiling, alive, vibrant. Yet she remembered the woman who died coughing in a small rented room, unable to pay for medicine. How could that same woman be pictured in a mansion, wrapped in fine lace, standing beside a much younger Chief Eze? Amaka waited until the noise thinned, until the staff filed out for morning chores. Then she pulled the photo out and traced her mother's cheek with a trembling finger. Another slip of paper fell out from the sleeve, yellow with age, an access card marked Eze Holdings, Archive, Level B. Beneath it, in faint handwriting, were words that made her breath stop. For A, when she is brave enough. N. N for Nkem. Her mother. Amaka pressed the card to her lips, her eyes filling with tears. She barely heard the knock at her door until it came again, harder. She shoved the photo under her pillow and opened it. Madame Rose stepped in, shutting the door behind her with a quiet click. The older woman's presence filled the small space. Her eyes studied Amaka with a softness that startled her. "You look like her," Rose said, her voice low, "just like Nkem when Harmattan came. Eyes too big for secrets." Amaka's chest tightened. "You knew my mother?" Rose nodded, sitting on the edge of the bunk. "More than knew her. She worked here before you were born, not as a maid like us, but as the chief's private secretary. She knew every file, every meeting, every debt he owed, and every betrayal he tried to bury. Your mother was the reason this house still stands." Amaka's throat burned. "Why didn't she tell me? Why did she let me grow up in poverty?" Rose's expression turned grim. "Because silence was the only thing keeping you safe. After she died, envelopes came every term. Your school fees did not fall from the sky. Someone paid them." Amaka's breath caught. Shame and anger tangled like thorny vines inside her chest. "Then why did Chief Eze pretend not to know me? Why send me here, through an agency, like I was nothing?" Rose sighed. "Because he hasn't said your name aloud in 12 years. To speak it would mean facing everything he buried with your mother. But the past has a way of clawing back when you least expect it." She leaned closer and lowered her voice. "If you want the truth, you must show him something he cannot deny. Your mother left you more than photographs. There is a box hidden under the loose floorboard in the study. She made me promise not to touch it, not to tell you until you were ready." Rose stood, placing a small brass key on the bed. "You are ready now." Then, without waiting for Amaka's answer, she left the room, her slippers whispering against the tiles. Amaka sat frozen, the key heavy in her palm, the words echoing in her ears. A box, a promise. Fear swelled inside her, but behind it something else grew. Hope, fragile but alive. She thought of Mama's last words before death. "One day you will understand why I pushed you to study." Now, perhaps she did. Outside, the sun climbed higher, gilding the mansion's walls. But for Amaka, the day had already split in two.
the life she had lived until now, and the life that waited in a locked box under a floorboard. The question pressed hard against her chest. Was she brave enough to open it? If this were you, would you risk everything to learn the truth about your own blood, or would you hide from it forever?
That night, the mansion slept under a sky thick with shadows, the storm having left the air heavy and restless. And while the guards paced lazily at the gates, and the maids curled in their bunks, Amaka moved barefoot across the marble halls like a ghost carrying only one thing, the small brass key Madame Rose had placed in her hand. Her heart hammered so loudly she was sure it would wake the walls themselves. But still, she pushed open the door to the study, that forbidden chamber where secrets whispered louder than clocks. The chandelier above glowed faintly, casting fractured light on the desk that had already betrayed its first secret, and Amaka dropped to her knees beside the loose floorboard Rose had pointed out. Her fingers pried at it, splinters biting her skin, until the wood gave way and revealed a tin box wrapped carefully in plastic. Her breath caught, trembling hands lifting it out like treasure too holy to touch. She unlocked it with the key, and inside lay a diary, a flash drive, and a folded letter sealed with lipstick faded lilac, the exact shade her mother used to wear on Christmas mornings. Amaka hesitated, then reached for the diary, its pages filled with her mother's neat handwriting. The entries documented meeting minutes, drafts of legal contracts, and strange notations of numbers and names Amaka did not understand. But certain sentences leapt from the pages like flames. He promised to do right by truth. Another, written just weeks before her mother's death, shook her. If anything happens to me, Rose knows where the second witness signed. The shares must go to the rightful heir. The word heir made Amaka's stomach twist. Could Mama have meant her? She turned the next page, but froze when her phone vibrated suddenly in her apron pocket, the loud buzz slicing the silence. She pulled it out. The screen flashed, unknown number. Against all reason, she answered, whispering, "Hello?" A man's voice, low and sharp, slithered through the speaker. "If you value your life, leave that diary where you found it." Her throat tightened, but before she could speak, the line clicked dead. Cold fear spread across her body. She shoved the diary back into the box, her fingers trembling so badly she almost dropped it. That was when the study door creaked open. Amaka's heart lurched. She spun around, clutching the box to her chest, bracing for Rose. But it was not her. It was Mr. Felix, Chief Eze's cousin, the man who always hovered around bank documents and tax meetings like a vulture waiting for carrion. His eyes scanned the room, then narrowed on her crouched by the floorboard. "Working late?" he asked, his smile wide but empty. Amaka scrambled to her feet, fumbling for words. I was checking for leaks, sir, the roof." Felix stepped closer, his cologne sharp in the air. "Funny time to check for leaks, little maid." His eyes slid toward the tin box in her hands, then back to her face. "Some drawers, some floors, they stay locked for good reason. Curiosity is not always a virtue." Amaka's pulse thundered. She wanted to flee, but forced herself to steady her voice. "I was only told to clean." For a long, suffocating moment, he studied her, eyes dark as though weighing whether to snatch the box from her. Finally, he smirked and stepped back. "First weak nerves. I'll forget I saw you." He reached the door, paused, and looked back. "But remember this house eats little girls who think they matter." Then he was gone, his footsteps fading like poison down the corridor. Amaka waited, barely breathing, before she slid the diary into her apron,
returned the box under the floorboard, and replaced the wood. She stood slowly, the chandelier light trembling across her face. Her body was weak with fear, yet her resolve hardened. Someone did not want her to know the truth, which meant the truth mattered more than she could imagine. She walked out of the study, her bare feet cold against marble, the diary pressed against her heart. She had one night to decide: burn it, hide it, or demand the answers that could change everything. But she knew deep inside she could never go back to being the invisible maid. She had touched the storm, and it had already claimed her. If this were you, would you risk defying powerful men to uncover your mother's secret, or would you bury it forever?
Morning broke with the low hum of a convoy as Chief Tobichaku Eze returned from his trip, his fleet rolling through the gates of the mansion like kings returning from war. And when he stepped out, tall though weary, gray streaking his temples, the entire staff bowed with rehearsed obedience. Amaka's pulse raced as she dusted along the hall, the diary still hidden under her mattress, her mind circling the words she had read, the rightful heir. This was the man whose shadow loomed over her life, the man who might hold the key to the mystery of her mother. Yet to him she was nothing but another pair of hands scrubbing floors. By noon she heard her name called. Madame Rose's voice carried softly but firmly. "Chief wants the study cleaned again." Amaka's legs nearly gave out. She steadied herself, wiped her palms against her apron, and walked into the forbidden room where Chief sat behind his mahogany desk. His gaze lifted slowly, sharp as a blade that had seen too many wars. On instinct, Amaka dropped to her knees, clutching the sealed letter Rose had given her, the one Mama Inkem had left behind. Her voice quivered as she spoke. "Sir, I found this beneath the floorboard. My mother wrote it." Silence filled the study, broken only by the faint ticking of the gold clock. The chief's hand, steady with decades of power, trembled as he reached for the letter, his eyes softening when he saw the familiar lilac smear of lipstick. For long minutes he read, lips pressed into a thin line, shoulders folding in on themselves like a man carrying too much. When he finally looked at Amaka, the mask of wealth cracked and sorrow bled through. "Your mother," he said hoarsely, "saved me from ruin." He stood, pacing slowly, words falling from him like confessions. "Years ago, Felix siphoned millions from my accounts through shell companies. I was blind with ambition, reckless, ready to collapse. Your mother brought me proof and gave me a choice: protect this family, clean the books, and promise that when the time came, I would leave a legacy built on integrity, not deceit. She believed in me more than I deserved." His eyes closed briefly, and when he opened them, they brimmed with regret. "I failed her. I postponed the truth. I thought I had more time. Then she fell ill, and before I knew it, she was gone." Amaka's hands clenched, anger and heartbreak surging through her veins. "Why didn't you tell me? Why let me suffer when she wanted me to know?" His voice broke. "Because to admit it would mean admitting I was a coward. I couldn't face you, not when every glance reminded me of her." He sat heavily, as though the chair alone kept him upright. "You are not my secret, Amaka. You are my responsibility. She wanted you to inherit what she protected." At that moment, the study door burst open, and Felix stepped in unannounced, his smile too quick, his eyes scanning the desk until they landed on the diary Amaka had set down. His face hardened. "Well, well," he drawled, the past finally crept out of its grave. He strolled inside, his voice oily. "Cousin, why dig up old ghosts? The girl's a maid, nothing more. Give me the book and we'll forget this nonsense." Chief's hand covered the diary like a shield. "Touch it, Felix, and I'll break your hand." Felix's smile faltered, replaced by a sneer. He shifted his gaze to Amaka, his tone venomous. "You think this changes who you are? You're nothing but a cleaner wearing borrowed courage. Don't let her drag your empire down with fairy tales." Amaka lifted her chin, fire burning through her fear. "Sometimes maids carry truths too heavy for millionaires," she said quietly, her voice shaking yet clear. Felix's eyes darkened, the mask slipping to reveal raw threat. But before he could retort, Madame Rose entered, two stern men in plain suits behind her. "Not fairy tales," she said firmly. "Facts. These men are from the Corporate Crimes Commission." The room shifted instantly. Felix stiffened, his bravado faltering as the officers stepped forward. Amaka's breath caught as tension thickened, her fate, her mother's legacy, and her boss's empire now trembling on the edge of revelation. The chandelier above flickered, shadows dancing like restless spirits, and in that charged silence, everyone realized the House of Secrets was about to collapse. If this were you, would you side with power and keep quiet? Or would you risk everything to stand with the truth?
The air inside the study turned thick enough to choke as Felix's practiced smile collapsed into something darker, his eyes darting between the diary on the desk and the two corporate crimes officers flanking Madame Rose like shadows of judgment. And in that moment, Amaka realized she was standing inside a battlefield disguised as a library of wealth. Felix adjusted his cufflinks slowly, the mask of calm returning as he stepped closer to Chief Eze, his voice smooth like venom diluted with honey. "Cousin, let's be rational. Old grudges and dying wishes, what good are they now? Business thrives on burying the past, not unearthing it." He reached toward the diary, but Chief's hand tightened on it with a fury that made his knuckles whiten. "Touch this," the chief said, his voice low and steady, "and I will break your hand." Felix chuckled, but his laugh cracked like glass. He shifted his gaze toward Amaka, his lips curling into a sneer. "And you, little maid, do you think a book of scribbles makes you someone? You've scrubbed floors your whole life. Don't let a ghost trick you into thinking you belong here." Amaka's heart pounded, but instead of shrinking, she heard her mother's voice echoing in her chest. "When truth calls, you stand tall." She raised her chin and said softly yet firmly, "Sometimes maids carry truths too heavy for millionaires." The officers exchanged glances, their pens already moving across small notepads, and Felix's face drained of its color. "You've been reading speeches," he snapped. "Dangerous!" He spun back to Chief Eze, his voice hardening. "Destroy the diary. I'll patch the holes. We'll move forward clean." But the chief, shoulders sagging with years of guilt, shook his head. "I moved already, Felix. The night Nkem gave me this proof. I chose silence, and it cost her life. Silence ends today." He slid the flash drive across the desk toward the officers, who pocketed it with care, the sound of it sealing Felix's doom. Rage twisted Felix's features as he lunged suddenly, grabbing for the diary, but Amaka clutched it to her chest with surprising strength. For a heartbeat, their hands wrestled over the fragile leather binding, an old book holding power enough to topple empires. "Give it!" Felix hissed, his breath hot with desperation. "You don't know what you're playing with." But before he could wrench it away, the chief pulled him back, and the officers moved swiftly, pinning Felix against the mahogany desk as papers fluttered like white birds fleeing a storm. In the scuffle, a photograph slipped free, landing on the carpet. Maman Kem cradling a baby, the anklet engraved with AE glinting under the chandelier light. For a moment, everyone froze, staring at the undeniable evidence of Amaka's bloodline, a silent verdict shining from silver letters. Felix struggled, spitting curses as the officers snapped cuffs around his wrists, his threats spilling like poison. "This won't save you. You think the world will let a maid inherit an empire? You're finished, both of you." His words echoed as they dragged him from the study, his protests fading into the hallway. The silence that followed pressed heavily on Amaka's shoulders, but Chief Eze broke it with a sigh so deep it seemed pulled from years of regret. "I wanted to give you the world without giving you my shame, but in waiting I gave you neither." He opened a folder and slid it toward her, an unsigned trust deed drafted years ago, her name inked faintly in the margins. "Your mother begged me to sign this before her last hospital trip. She said, Tobe, if you believe in me, sign it for her future. I told her there was time. Time betrayed her. His voice cracked. Let me fix what I can. Amaka's hands shook as she touched the paper. I don't want your name, she said quietly, tears brimming. I want the chance my mother fought for. The chief's eyes glistened as he handed her a pen. Then we'll do it her way. Madame Rose stepped forward, laying a velvet pouch on the desk. Inside lay the tiny anklet itself, mended but gleaming. Amaka slipped it onto her wrist, and something inside her chest unlocked. The weight of poverty, grief, and secrets shifting into a new kind of strength. She signed the paper, her hand steady now, and for the first time in her life, she felt the mansion's light not as judgment, but as witness. If this were you, would you accept the legacy of a secret past, or would you turn away, afraid of the power it carried?
The mansion transformed into a courtroom without walls in the days that followed, its marble corridors echoing with the shuffle of investigators, cataloging files, photographing documents, and interviewing startled staff, while Felix raged in handcuffs like a trapped lion, spitting poison at anyone who passed, swearing that his downfall would drag others with him. When the officers finally led him away, his last glance at Amaka was not a threat, but a promise whispered through clenched teeth. This won't save you, girl. The storm has only begun. His words lodged like thorns in her chest, but Chief Eze's weary hand on her shoulder steadied her. Let me do what I should have done years ago, he murmured, sliding the trust deed back across the desk, this time fully signed with his bold scrawl. Your mother's wish will not die in silence. You will stand where she wanted you to stand. Amaka trembled, her mind still reeling, when Madame Rose placed a velvet pouch into her hand, revealing the small anklet that once gleamed on her infant foot. A.E. etched deeply into its silver. Your mother made me keep this until you could carry her name without bowing, Rose whispered, her eyes wet. Amaka clipped it onto her wrist, the cool chain warming instantly against her skin, and for the first time in her life, she felt her existence validated not by poverty's struggle, but by truth itself. She co-signed the document, the pen heavy yet liberating, and when she set it down, the chandelier's light no longer felt harsh. It glowed like dawn breaking over her soul. Yet victory did not taste sweet. The newspapers roared with headlines. Felix in fraud probe. Corporate commission seize his assets. And the agency that once dismissed her now called, offering better placements. She ignored them, packing her meager belongings from the servants' quarters to move into an upstairs room not because she craved luxury, but because Rose insisted. You need a desk, not a bunk. The board of directors gathered days later, stiff and suspicious, some sneering at the sight of a maid turned heir in their midst, others quietly relieved that accountability had finally come. Amaka entered in a borrowed blouse, her anklet hidden under her sleeve, and stood tall as her mother once had when presenting ledgers. We will institute quarterly audits, public summaries, and establish a scholarship fund for staff families under the Inchem Foundation, she declared, her voice steady, though her knees trembled. A director scoffed, and who will oversee this miracle of transparency? Amaka met his gaze. I will, alongside the commission. Corruption thrives in shadows. We will light every corner. The room erupted in murmurs, but Chief Eze raised a weary hand. This is no maid speaking. This is the daughter of the woman who saved this house from ruin. Outside the boardroom, Amaka leaned against the wall, heart racing, the anklet charm pressing into her wrist like a reminder of her mother's strength. Chief Eze joined her, pride and sorrow braided in his gaze. You are your mother's echo, he whispered. Amaka shook her head softly. No, I am her answer. Later that evening, when she returned to the study, she opened the once forbidden drawer, now empty of secrets, and placed inside a new photograph. Mama Nenkem smiling in lilac, Amaka beside the chandelier, and Madame Rose in the middle, hand resting on both their shoulders. On the back, she wrote, Truth kept.
Just as she closed it, the landline in the hall rang, a clipped voice from the commission reporting that Felix had named others, more shadows entangled in fraud, and raids were already underway. Chief appeared in the doorway, his shoulders heavy. "There will be backlash," he said quietly. Amaka straightened, fire sparking in her eyes. "There will be work," she replied. In that moment, the mansion seemed to exhale, no longer a prison of secrets, but a house learning a new shape. Yet in the far corners, she could still feel the weight of Felix's words, a warning that victories were never final, that storms often return when the sky looks clear. If this were you, would you fear the backlash, or would you embrace the burden of truth, no matter the cost?
Weeks blurred into one another as the Ease mansion slowly adjusted to its new rhythm, not the hush of secrets, but the hum of change. And though whispers still followed Amaka everywhere, from skeptical directors to jealous maids, she walked taller now, the silver anklet glinting under her sleeve like a hidden crown. News outlets called her the Maid who uncovered an empire's truth. And while tabloids spun tales of scandal, Amaka focused on building what her mother had dreamed. The NChem Foundation was announced in a quiet press release, but its impact thundered through the community. Scholarships for staff children, medical stipends for families, and training programs for girls once destined to scrub floors as she had. On launch day, the mansion's garden bloomed with plastic chairs and borrowed canopies, filled not with governors and tycoons, but with cleaners, drivers, cooks, and their children, wearing uniforms too stiff and new for their skinny shoulders. Amaka stood at the podium, her voice carrying the conviction she barely recognized as her own. My mother believed legacy is not a will, but a door. Today we hinge that door so it no longer slams on the hands of those who keep this house standing. Murmurs turned to applause, tears streaking cheeks hardened by years of service. Chief Eze, standing at her side, whispered with a voice heavy with both pride and penance, "You are her echo." But Amaka lifted her wrist, showing the anklets gleam. "No," she corrected softly, "I am her answer." Later that evening, when the chairs were cleared and the guests departed, Amaka wandered into the study that had once terrified her. The drawer that revealed her past now stood empty, no longer a coffin for secrets, but a vessel for new beginnings. She placed inside a freshly printed document titled Ethics Charter, Ease Holdings, co-signed by her and the chief, a pledge carved not in silence but in ink. As she closed it, the chandelier above hummed with warm light instead of judgment. Yet even as peace settled over the mansion, shadows still pressed against its walls. The Corporate Crimes Commission called with updates. Felix had confessed to a network of collaborators, naming bankers, suppliers, and even foreign partners who had fattened themselves on stolen money. Raids were underway, and more arrests loomed. "The storm isn't over," Chief admitted, as they walked together across the balcony overlooking Abuja's glittering skyline. "Every name Felix gives is another snake waiting to strike." Amaka gripped the railing, wind lifting her braids. "Then we cut off their heads one by one. We don't flinch, we don't hide. Mama didn't, and neither will I." Chief studied her profile, pride mingling with regret, and for the first time he saw not the timid maid who once polished his furniture, but a young woman carrying the weight of justice on her shoulders. Down in the garden, Madame Rose watered the hibiscus, her eyes lifting to the balcony, a smile ghosting her lips as though she could see Nkem herself standing beside Amaka. That night, alone in her new upstairs room, Amaka placed the anklet on the nightstand, touched the photograph of her mother, and whispered, "I am carrying it forward, Mama. Your fight is not wasted." Sleep came late, heavy with both relief and dread, because deep in her chest she felt what Felix's final words meant. The storm had only just begun. If this were you, would you rest in the glow of victory, or would you keep your armor on, knowing enemies strike hardest when you least expect it?
The weeks stretched into months, and the mansion that once imprisoned silence now blossomed into a home of second chances. its garden no longer reserved for wealthy banquets, but for children in bright uniforms chasing butterflies while their parents, drivers, cleaners, guards, smiled with the pride poverty had long stolen from them. All funded by the income foundation that bore the name of the woman who had fought for truth even with her dying breath. On the day of the official inauguration, the mansion's garden filled again, not with corrupt businessmen or grasping politicians, but with families of staff who now dared to dream beyond survival. The chief, older now, stood beside Amaka, who spoke into the microphone with a steadiness that silenced even the most cynical hearts. My mother taught me that legacy is not about titles or wealth, but about doors that open for others, not slam shut. Today, we make sure that no child who serves in the shadow of wealth will ever be denied light. The applause thundered, echoing into the city beyond. Later, when the guests had departed and the banners fluttered quietly in the evening wind, Chief handed Amaka one final envelope, his hand trembling as he pressed it into hers. "Your mother left one more instruction," he whispered. Inside was a letter from Mama and Kem, written in her graceful script. "Tell Amaka to choose her path without owing apologies. Her strength is her own, her destiny hers to claim." Tears blurred Amaka's eyes as she folded the letter close to her chest. "She believed in me more than I believed in myself," she whispered, and the chief nodded, his voice breaking. "She believed in all of us, and we failed her. Until now." As the sun dipped, painting the sky in gold, Amaka walked back into the study, that room where her life had changed. She opened the once forbidden drawer, now repurposed as a vessel of memory, and placed inside the new ethics charter, signed by her, the chief, and the board, a promise that the company would live by principles her mother had died protecting. For a long moment, she stared at her reflection in the desk glass and no longer saw a maid, but a young woman crowned by truth and resilience. Yet even as peace wrapped around her shoulders, the phone rang from the hallway, a shrill interruption slicing through the stillness. She picked it up, expecting another call from the commission about Felix's case, but the voice on the line was neither official nor familiar. It was low, mocking, almost playful. "You think Felix was the only shadow?" the caller asked, a chuckle curling at the edges. "He was just the first. The empire you protect was built on debts unpaid, and others are coming to collect. Tell Chief his storm isn't over." The line went dead. Amaka's blood ran cold, the anklet on her wrist suddenly feeling heavier than ever. She turned slowly toward the chandelier above, its glow trembling, and for the first time in weeks, she felt the mansion watching her again, not as a home, but as a battleground. When Chief entered moments later, he read the fear in her eyes without needing words. "Who was it?" he asked. Amaka's voice shook as she whispered, "Someone who says Felix was only the beginning." The Chief's face darkened, his jaw tightening as though bracing for another wave. "Then we prepare," he said quietly. Amaka looked at the photograph of her mother on the desk, then back at him, determination burning through her fear. "This time, we fight together." Outside, the wind rose, rustling the hibiscus in the garden, and the mansion seemed to shiver with the knowledge that though one battle had ended, another loomed unseen. The story was not over. It was only the beginning of a war that would test how much truth the family could carry before it broke them. And as the night closed in, Amaka whispered to her mother's memory, "I am ready." If this were you, would you walk away now that you have won? Or would you stay and fight, knowing storms always return for those who dare to claim the truth?
And so, Amaka's life was never the same again. What began as an ordinary cleaning job became the doorway to truths hidden for more than a decade. She was no longer just a maid. She was her mother's answer, carrying a legacy built on sacrifice and courage. But remember, every truth comes with a cost, and every storm leaves behind clouds that may return. If this were you, would you fight for the truth no matter the danger, or would you walk away and protect your peace? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe courage can rewrite destiny, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one.